We have no choice.
Let them go. They can work. Make Viviro.
Truth or lies?
Lies! 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 Firebolt is not gun damage! Stop saying it's gun damage! Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to a new video on the channel. I'm sure you all know while you're here today. I'm not going to waste too much of your time. Yes, that's right. The Clawbringer has received another buff in Wonderlands. I'm sure at this time I've got like the FBI watching every piece of content I make. They want to know when I'm coming back to Wonderlands to play the fateful Clawbringer. Well, baby, we're back today. That's right, boys. Today, Gearbox delivered buffs to the Clawbringer in the latest Wonderlands hotfix, which overall I actually thought was a pretty decent hotfix. There are some pretty batshit crazy changes that want to make me rip my hair out, but we'll talk about those in just a few minutes. But let's get right into the goods. You've all come here for the Clawbringer. I'm coming for the Clawbringer. And today, it's time, baby. Let's talk about what they did. Let's work our way down the tree. So first of all, Oath of Thunder now deals 6% bonus melee damage per point instead of 5%. I gotta be honest, this is a little bit of a crazy change. I'm not entirely sure why this was done, because Oath of Thunder was actually one of the few good skills that the Clawbringer had going for it. So I gotta be honest, making Oath of Thunder now give you, I guess that would just be an extra 5% at max spec, is a little bit questionable, mainly because I don't think it's going to be a huge increase, but also because I don't think it was necessary. I mean, I thought this skill was doing pretty fine. The next buff that was delivered is to the tier 2 Dragon Aura. Its elemental damage got a 1% buff, going from 4% to 5%, meaning now you could get this up to 25% instead of just 20%. Now, I will say, just like I did for Oath of Thunder, I gotta be honest, this is a little bit of a peculiar change, because Dragon Aura is a skill which, again, was already good and didn't need a buff, so it's a little bit odd watching them buff these skills here which were already good. But nonetheless, we're going to continue down the tree. Let's talk about it, boys. You know this is going to be the fighting place. This is where we're going into Fight Club straight away. Firebolt, the most controversial skill aside from Ore in the Clawbringer's tree, has been buffed. Gearbox say that Firebolt's gun damage has been increased by 2%, making it 10% per point instead of 8%. Man, where do I start on this change? Well, firstly, it is not gun damage. This skill still does bullet damage and is not gun damage. We are still misleading players. We are still leading the claw mains into a dark alleyway and then beating the life out of them. This is not gun damage. This is bullet damage. We need to start describing it as that if we're not going to keep misleading players. But additionally, I will say that the 2% change is almost minuscule, because this is a 1-point skill. Now, I do believe it is possible to get 1 point into Firebolt via a class mod. I'm actually not entirely sure on that. Someone will have to correct me in the comments, but even if you could, that's still not that big of an increase. Making this only 2%, I don't think does much for a skill that people were already speccing out of pity just to take Ore. So changing it from 8% up to 10% is a little bit weird to me, because I don't think it actually has done anything in the long run. I would have actually liked to see this skill get boosted up to 15%. I think that would have been a little bit more desirable and would have done a lot more for it. But if I'm being honest, the problem with Firebolt, first of all, aside from the fact that it is completely lying to anybody who specs it thinking it's gun damage, is that the value is just pretty insignificant. Again, I think for a tree which is so heavy into elemental damage and elemental melee damage, what would be more beneficial to Clawbringers is if Firebolt was actually changed to ability damage instead of, quote, gun damage. I think you would just see a lot more return out of that, and you could even leave it at 8%, and I still think that would benefit you a lot more than this does. But nonetheless, this is the change they made to Firebolt, so yeah. Now for the last change, let's talk about Ore. Ore is the second most controversial skill in the history of the Clawbringer lore. The manga has gotten deeper and deeper every week. We're at basically 60,000 depth at this point. Let's talk about Ore. For those of you out of the loop, the quick TLDR is that before the hotfix, if you had 1 point into Ore and it said 11% critical hit chance, it would dump that on top of what you already have. Gearbox later changed that to multiply for a portion instead, meaning it was effectively a nerf to the skill, and a lot of people, including myself, just do not take it anymore. Well, today's hotfix has changed Ore, because it now gives you 13% critical hit chance per point instead of 11%. and the critical hit damage is now 7% per point instead of 5%. Now, let's talk about this, because this one I think is actually pretty dang interesting. Let's talk about the critical hit damage first, because I actually think this buff is quite beneficial to players, boasting 2% per increase point, which is pretty damn solid because Ore's critical hit damage was already good as is. The only problem with this is that we're going to run into the same issue we did when I talked about the issues with Clawbringer, and it's that Ore still does not get procced by bonus elements, meaning you will not get the effects of Ore's critical hit damage, or chance for that matter, unless you are primarily using that element. If you have bonus elements from stuff like Oath of Thunder or Oath of Fire, that is not going to help you and you're not going to proc Ore. So while this increase to critical hit damage is really nice, actually, in my opinion, I don't think it's all that great in the long run, because once again, Ore is still a bugged skill, or at least we believe it to be bugged. Now, as for the critical hit chance, going to 13% instead of 11%. If I'm being completely honest, I don't think this is going to make a difference to Ore. While the increase, I do think you may see a change on your overall critical hit chance with. I've also got to say that before this, most players were reporting that they could barely get above 5% increased critical hit chance with more than 3 points into Ore, so only buffing the skill by 2% is a little bit peculiar to me, because I don't think that actively changes anything with the way the critical hit chance works on Ore. Now, for the record and for complete transparency, I could be completely and utterly wrong here. I just don't believe that's the case. I think a more desirable change to Ore would have been to change this skill back to post-add, adding the value on top of your critical hit chance and lowering the value instead of upping it, and that would have given players even more of an increase than they're seeing today, while also keeping the skill fairly balanced. But that's just my 2 cents on it. So overall, my thoughts on the changes today to the Clawbringer is that while it's appreciated, and I'm sure you actually will see an increase in performance with the Clawbringer, I think the changes were a little bit misplaced here. For example, Dragon Aura getting a buff as well as Oath of Thunder is a little bit weird because they were absolutely fine as is. But anyway, this is just my 2 cents on it, just giving my thoughts on it because I know a lot of people are curious. Let me know what you guys think of this hotfix in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Have a great day, everybody, and enjoy Wonderlands if you decide to hop in today and play around with these buffs. Also, they buffed Torgue stickies.